As I mentioned, I'm Wongani, Oxford-based architecture and design cooperative, Transition by Design, and we've been involved in several projects in Oxford, leading community engagement, and at times we've been both on the design side and community engagement side. Most recently, on a couple of major projects, we've been on the community engagement delivery. So I'm just going to focus on that. And I really wanted to highlight speaking about this topic through one of the projects that we've recently completed, the Blackbird Leys Community Centre that I've already mentioned. And in essence, with this project, it was for a new community centre for a part of Oxford called Blackbird Leys and Greater Leys, a part of Oxford with much sort of rich history. Over 60 years, the community centre has been a focal point of that region. But in essence, the building sort of needed a sort of new lease of life, and there was a wider regeneration scheme that was happening within the area, creating a new sort of district centre and more affordable housing within the area. So we were appointed to deliver the community engagement for this really important centre and this really important space for the local community. And in essence, this is the old building, as you can see in this picture. We had a strategy that made sure that we were sort of inclusive, ensuring that we had a diverse representation, informative, and working across all the RIBA work stages. So we're really fortunate, and I think it's not always going to be the case. I'm sure it'll be interesting to hear about the conversations that we'll have. But it's not always the case that you get to have community engagement throughout all the RIBA work stages. And I would actually say with this project, we had the opportunity to do that, working from the preparation and brief stage all the way through. Well, currently it's in planning stage, but there is going to be continued community engagement through to the completion of the project. And I want to first, I guess, frame the context of what we did the engagement with and then sort of land with maybe some food for thought. So the context with this project was that the area of Blackbird Leys is an area where there's been a lot of it's on the edge of the city of Oxford, outside of the ring road, which is a really key connection point of the city, but also feels disconnected in terms of a transport perspective from a pedestrian's point of view, but also from bus networks, etc. It's a bit more tricky to be connected and feel connected to the city centre. Many people feel sort of left behind, and also the wards within the local area have high levels, some of the higher levels of deprivation within Oxfordshire itself, and within the 10% of the most deprived communities within the country. So within that context, you can understand why there'll be a lot of skepticism, but also maybe even mistrust to a certain extent of those in the local authority, but also those professionals who are coming to the local area. A lot of people felt that things and projects have been done to them. Many surveys have been completed in that area, looking at health and well-being outcomes, but also many consultations have happened on different projects, whether it's within the surrounding area or within the Leys itself. And this has had an impact on the local community, and we felt that when we first arrived at this project. This was a scheme that had been talked about for several years, for about 5 to 10 years prior to it commencing to when we were appointed. So we were working within a context where people already felt that perhaps this was never going to happen, but also that they were doubtful of how much their voice will impact in shaping the local context. And I guess I could summarize all of that is in a way of thinking that in our experience, there are many people who feel a sense of being passengers or just walking along as development is happening around them and not with them. So our question was, how do we do that in a genuine way? I could speak for a while, but I think I'll just land in just showing about how our approach worked for this project and how we tried to tackle that skepticism and also consultation fatigue that people can feel. We included a community review panel process as part of this. I'm not going to speak into all the detail about it, but what it was is there were local residents. We had a recruitment process. And they were all people who weren't necessarily involved in the built environment. There was only one person who professionally had engaged in the built environment previously. Everyone else had other sort of life skills. And they were all key people, individuals who were a diverse range of ages, expertise, etc., who were helping to meet with the project team at 4 different points across the year that we had the engagement for this project. So that was one of the key ways that we embedded to build trust and to tackle that issue of consultation fatigue. But also, we're fortunate to have this period of, as I mentioned, working from the brief writing stage all the way through to the planning submission with community engagement events. And in essence, I would just to come to land, to summarize by saying that the engagement really benefited from being able to have direct contact with existing groups in the local area. So, in moving forward, what I would suggest in terms of any engagement, which I'm sure many of you on this call already sort of practicing, is that face-to-face interaction of someone who's continuously there. So I was always cycling down to the Leys, going to local events, youth clubs, homework clubs, to family events, to sort of local groups, seniors cafes, etc., where we were gathering people's ideas and thoughts from the brief writing all the way through to completion. And we also did host standalone events. But having that constant face and connection meant that we were able to complete engagement strategy around the backdrop of consultation fatigue. And I guess I'll just probably leave it there for now before we break into conversations together, because there's many more points I can bring into this conversation. But I think one thing I'd probably also invite you all to consider is, I guess, what impact we can have as practitioners in a client side, because I think we were fortunate to work with a client that was willing to do engagement throughout this whole process from the brief writing stage through to completion. And I think that's a key element for us to consider in this example, and maybe it could be something that we touch on in the conversations that we'll have shortly as well.
Thank you, Wongani. That was great to see. And also you touched on so many topics that I imagine will come in the conversations later. How is the brief built? How is our engagement kind of scope built? And how much can we push that onward from the client side, but also like the face-to-face conversation and making yourself available even out with your scope is something that sometimes we have to do as kind of engagement practitioners. Yeah, thank you so much.